Good evening, everyone. We'll start shortly. We have around 40 participants now. I would request everyone to keep their mics on mute and videos off if possible, so that we'll get better bandwidth. Also note that this meeting will be recorded. I'm Pratiksha Kothare from Nature Conservation Society of Nasik. I welcome you all. So NCSN is a Nasik-based NGO where we work primarily on Nasik's wildlife research, awareness, and conservation. Our group was started by Shri Vishwaroop Raha in 1994. We officially got registered in the year 2000, and since then, our primary focus is awareness. We have nature clubs in city school as well as tribal schools. However, due to COVID, the schools are shut, and to continue our awareness efforts, we have started this webinar series, and we have got good response till now. This is our 10th webinar, and I thank you all for joining. I will now introduce Pranat to you. Pranat was born and brought up in Mumbai, but the forest always attracted him. Although he has completed his master's in business administration, at the first opportunity he got, Pranat left the city and started working near a forest. Pranath has worked as a naturalist with some top-notch wildlife resorts in the country like Ranthambore, Kabini, Tadoba, and is currently located at Kanha. He is also an amateur wildlife photographer and often writes articles and blogs about wildlife in an attempt to popularize the biodiversity of India. So we are very honored to have Pranath today. So I request Pranath to take over and start with the webinar. Also kindly note that this webinar will be of 45 minutes and later we'll open the session for question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pratiksha, for that wonderful introduction. So just to add to it, I have been a naturalist now. I work as a naturalist. I mean, everyone knows that by now. I've been working as a naturalist for over 10 years now. Started in 2010. And over these last 10 years, I found out that it's a very unique field, unique job opportunity. A lot of people are interested, but don't know how to start, where to start from. And that is the whole reason to have this presentation today, have this talk, is I'll just be sharing some of my experiences and hopefully give a fair bit of idea for youngsters who might be interested in being a naturalist of how they can start, what to expect from this sort of a job, and what you are expected to do, and maybe where this might lead in the future. So the first question to somebody who's not aware about this field is, what is a naturalist? What does a naturalist exactly do? So this is the Google definition: an expert in or a student of natural history. And anybody who's even remotely associated to wildlife or to nature is a naturalist, I feel, because you keep on observing things, you note it down either in a notebook or make a mental note of it. So you immediately become a student of natural history with your observations when you share these things with everyone else through your photos, through some other media. So essentially what I'm trying to say is everyone is a naturalist, but we have a field called as a naturalist, a job profile called as a naturalist. And this is something that is very similar to what rangers do in Africa. When you go to any wildlife parks in Africa, there is a ranger who takes you out for the drives, for the safaris, shows you wildlife. And this started quite late in India to have someone, guiding you. We had local guides right from the beginning since wildlife tourism started. But the local guides, the major aim there was to give job opportunities to local people so that they can earn from the
Pranath,
tourism. Yes.
sorry to disturb you. You have to again share your screen. There's some
Okay.
problem. Yeah.
Is it visible now?
Yeah, it is visible. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we have local guides in most of the parks in India, But we couldn't, when the resort started having experts, there were wildlife experts brought in for certain guests, tourists. We could not use the term ranger because already in our forest department, there is a post called range officer or ranger. So new term was coined, and naturalist was the term that was used. It became a widely used. It was not invented in India, but after this, it became a widely used word in India. And if you see today, even in America, even in Europe, this word naturalist is quite frequently used to describe people who take you out and guide you during your wildlife or excursions in the wild, excursions in natural environments. So is a naturalist now? As I've mentioned, essentially it's a person who guides you to and helps you to explore nature or wildlife. But with the sort of field this is, people who come in are really interested, and you immediately, it's very easy to strike a friendship. So a naturalist becomes much more than a guide, becomes a friend, as I've mentioned. If you're working with a lodge, like I've done for so many years, you become a host. And even if you're not working for a lodge, if let's say you're a freelance naturalist and traveling with a group, wherever you go, you represent your country. So you are indeed a host for your tourists. You also become an idol. A lot of youngsters coming in and they say, I have met a lot of parents who said, my kid is really interested in wildlife. And I really didn't know that such an opportunity is there. So these kids look up to you. They want to grow up to become naturalists. And you can, in fact, become a mentor and help such youngsters pursue their career in the field of wildlife. But what is the need for a naturalist? Uh, so in the last few years, since 2010, since I've started, in fact, the domestic sector of wildlife tourism has increased by about 600%. This is just till before COVID. Unfortunately, all tourism activities are closed right now. But if the last 10 years have shown any sort of indication, I'm sure even after the restrictions lift up, after the COVID restrictions are out of the way, people will want to travel to these places. Um, when you are close to nature, I'm sure everyone has experienced this. It's quite relieving. You can release your stress. And this is what a lot of people have found out. People don't want to go to theme parks and travel to crowded cities anymore. But people want to come out of the cities, come close to nature, enjoy the peace and quiet. And there is no doubt that such tourism will keep on increasing. But when a lot of people do travel to wildlife areas, especially, they are not always aware of what are the do's and don'ts. If you can see in the image, you can see a lot of people standing in their jeep, standing on the bus. There was a tiger which was supposed to come out from the right, and the crowd is just anticipating the movement of this cat, but they are not thinking about their own safety. They are not thinking what the animal wants to do. The tiger actually wanted to cross the road, but did not have any gap in between. So ethical tourism is also necessary when people who don't have any experience about traveling in wildlife, about traveling in a national park, in areas which are untouched by urbanization, they don't know what to do. They will play loud music. They might throw garbage here and there. And that's where a guide is necessary, not just to tell them that you are not supposed to do this. This is the rule. You can't do this. But also why it is important to not do certain things and to do certain things. And that is where a naturalist can play a really fantastic and a big role, I feel. Obviously, when you're guiding them, you pick their interests, their awareness about such areas, so they become more curious. They start traveling more to such areas. So you are actually creating more responsible citizens simultaneously. And then something else I found out. There's a lot of competition to get seats for medical, to get seats for engineering. I'm not saying, I mean, we need engineers and doctors, but because of our increasing population and because of this increased competition, a lot of youngsters are now looking at job opportunities which are unconventional. Being a naturalist definitely is not a conventional job. So if you are interested, definitely, and if you're not interested in the fields, other fields which are more academical, you can look at this as being your career opportunity, an opportunity for your career. So what does a naturalist do? Wherever there are safaris, some of the big parks where naturalist works, you have to take guests out for safaris. But this is not always present everywhere. There are places where you don't have safaris, but you have a lot of nature walks, bird watching trails, lot of outings, trekking that naturalists can take tourists out to. You can do a lot of presentations related to the wildlife in and around your area, presentations about the conservation work that has been happening around you, presentations about the research that has been happening around you. And these will all interest which add to the experience of the guests, of the tourists who are coming to your place. You can also help in exploring local cultures, the markets, local traditions that are around you, historical monuments, architecture, whatever interests you, you can add to the experience of the guest. And obviously, I've already mentioned about playing the host. So throughout this whole thing, I think what differentiates a good naturalist from any other normal naturalist is that you forming a bond with the tourist, with the guest. If the guest feels comfortable of, just chit chatting with you, asking you questions, you have formed that bond, the guest will always feel that I have got a very good naturalist, and that my whole trip is successful just because of this naturalist. There are a lot of things that happen, all these to dos or all these jobs that I mentioned is something that happens in front of the scene that you're doing with the guest, but there are many things that happen behind the scenes as well. Um, so I'll give you examples that I have encountered so that it helps you connect to the points. Interacting with the local communities on behalf of the lodge or the company that you're working for. So where I work right now in Kana, our lodge also has an NGO, and we do a lot of activities with the local communities there. In the image, you can see we are. This is when we did a snake awareness program with one of the schools, but we had invited the Gram Panchayat from that area as well. So the Sarpanch and all the other elders in the village were there, and we spoke about why snakes are important and why they should not kill them. And since then, they have started calling us. There's a local guy who helps us rescue snakes in that area. So they call this rescuer rather than killing snakes blindly because they don't know how to identify them. We also help the local schools by doing presentations about many other things so that their education is not restricted to the curriculum that the state board has decided for them, but it helps them open their minds to new possibilities, new ideas. We have worked with the local women, we have worked with the forest guards. We do a lot of training programs for the guides over there. That's the second point, in fact, training programs. So right now I work in Kana, and every year, just when this before the season starts, so in October is when the season starts, and in September I always go and help the forest department in doing training programs for the guides of Kanha Tiger Reserve. Uh, and, and we try to cover many different things. Mammals and birds are something that they're already familiar with because they have done it so many times. But when a guest asks them about a frog or asks them about some plant, they become a little clueless. So we try to cover these things. We try to show them videos and photographs from Africa of how tourism happens there, because a lot of tourists do safaris in Africa and then come to India and find that it's a big difference. They ask their guides, but the guides are not aware of what's happening in Africa, so they can't really answer. So we try to help them have a conversation with the guest rather than just show them things that they're able to see on the safari. And then this last point is something that I added very recently, because I had a lot of youngsters who became naturalists, and then they say, my company wants me to keep accounts of the expenditure I'm doing. Oh, they are asking me to do inventories. So there is a little bit of boring office work that comes, but I think that is there with any job. It's not just with this particular field. So it's something that you have to do regardless. Now, if I've risen you the curiosity in you, you might be asking, am I fit to become a naturalist? Can I do something like this? Yes, everyone can do it. There is no educational qualification required to become a naturalist. But these are some of the skill sets that might help you to become a naturalist. And this is not something that you are
Pranab,
born.
so
Yes.
sorry. There was some disturbance. You have to again share your screen.
Okay, just 1 minute. Pratiksha, can you now see the screen?
Yeah, I can see the screen. Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So I was talking about the skills that are required or a naturalist should have. And these are not something that necessarily you're born with. These are something that you can train yourself and gain these skills. Knowledge is, of course, important, but I have kept that as the second point. I think the most important aspect or the most important skill that you require as a naturalist is communication. You are a storyteller when you're trying to share something with a guest, be it something that you are seeing on a safari, or be it a story that you might have, that's an incident that might have happened to you maybe a few years back. You have to tell it in a way that the tourist gets curious. You can tell it in a very boring way, and the guest will just lose interest. Tourist might just stop listening to you. You might go on, but the guest is not really paying any attention. What separates a good naturalist from an average naturalist, I would say, is when you're able to communicate in a way that everybody wants to listen to you. And I'll tell you, when I say that these skills are not necessarily something that you are born with, these are something that you can work on. Till my college days, I was an introvert. I found it very difficult to talk to people, very difficult to express myself. But once I started this job, over the years, I have become quite comfortable now talking to people, sharing my experiences, sharing my stories. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. So it's not something that if you're not good at communication, it doesn't mean that you are not fit to become a naturalist. You can train yourself. You can start reading books, start reading blogs, listen to documentaries, the narrations that they are doing, and these will all help you in having a better communication. The second point is knowledge. Of course, when you're guiding someone, you are expected to know things. There'll be hundreds of questions thrown at you. What is this? Why is this? How is this? And this is a field that is very vast. A single person is not expected to know everything that is to know about wildlife, that is to know about even one particular forest. So it is okay to say that I don't know, and it's a continuous learning process. When you say that you don't know something, go back, try to find it in the books, try to find it through videos or through friends that you know. And it actually makes a very good impact on the guest, that if you have said you don't know something, but then you find it out and go back to your guest and tell them, okay, you had asked me this question, I didn't know, but I asked my friends or I read this book and I found the answer to this. And they really feel that you have taken an effort, and you have because they asked you a question, you took that effort and you got the answer for them. Of course, a love for environment and nature and wildlife is required. And I think a person would only think of becoming a naturalist if this is there. And finally, the passion for the job. So I'll tell you something very interesting. People have a 9 to 5, 9 to 6 kind of a job profile. They go, they work in the office, they come back, and then they don't want to talk about work. They don't want to do anything extra because they get frustrated with that time that is there when they have to work. Um, with being a naturalist in the resorts, my day sometimes starts at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning because I have to get ready for the morning safari, and it then ends sometimes at 11 o'clock, 11:30. I'm having dinner with the guest. So till the time the guest is awake, sometimes I'm sitting with them talking about what we saw in the day, talking about what is the plan for the next day. So sleep at 11:30 and then be up again at 4 o'clock next morning. So these can be really long hours, but I have never felt that I am, being stretched because I love what I'm doing. So if you love what you're doing, it does not feel like job. It does not feel like work. It just feels like your life. And I feel that passion is really, really important if you want to be a good naturalist. Finally, these are some of the techniques that we use, and people, I'm sure you guys have gone out on trails. You have taken friends or family members who are not or are not exposed to wildlife, not exposed to the environment, and you probably have used these guiding techniques already. These are things that we teach to the local guides also. I told you I do trainings with them, and these are really helpful. Some of them are very particular to this field about being a naturalist, but some of them are the techniques which you can apply to any field, any sort of communication that you have, and any aspect of your life, and these will still be useful. The first point is obviously introduction. When you first meet your guest, your tourist, this might be on the safari itself, might be way before that when the guest checks into the lodge. Or if you're a freelance naturalist, you might meet them at an airport, at a railway station where you're picking them up. Your first
Pranav,
impact, yes.
sorry, some guests are actually they're trying to share the screen. So right now, I request everyone to do not share your screen. That disturbs the entire session. And Pranav, so sorry, you have to again share your screen.
Okay, just 1 minute. Pratiksha, is it okay if I keep it in this view? Because sometimes if I'm on the play mode, I think the slide changes don't happen. It uses more bandwidth probably. Are you able to see clearly everything on this mode as well?
Yeah, it's clearly visible.
Okay, so let me try when I'm changing slide. If it still doesn't work, then we'll figure something out.
All right. Yes.
Okay, so I was talking about introduction, and your first impression is, there's a saying, first impression is the last impression. I don't really believe that. You can change your impression, but your first impression definitely makes a lot of impact. It tells the guest what kind of a person you are and what kind of naturalist they have, how free they can be with you, or are you comfortable in chit-chatting with them. Just opens up a dialogue with them, and you can in fact make a very good rapport with your tourist, with your guest in the first introduction itself. When you're communicating, this is throughout, right from your introduction to your final goodbye and everything that you speak about in between. A clear and crisp communication is required. If you start talking, rambling on about things that the guest is not interested in, or try to tell a story which can be completed in 2 or 3 sentences, but you use maybe 15 or 20 sentences for it, you have spoken a lot, but you have not really increased their knowledge or shared a lot of information. That information could have been shared in a very brief communication. So that is what crisp communication is. Use less words, but try to make more or give more impact out of whatever you say. Always be reassuring. This is very important because guests, when they come with some expectations. If they're coming for the first time, let's say they're visiting a few tiger reserves, so for the first time they're coming to India, they will have an expectation of seeing a tiger. Let's say they come at a time when it's raining, and a lot of people who have been to tiger reserves know that sightings are not really good. Not just tigers, but overall a lot of animal sightings are not good when it rains. So the guest comes in, you meet, you give an introduction, and they say, oh, you know what, we really hope to see a tiger. And you tell them, you know what, the forecast says that it's going to rain for the next 2 days. You're here for 2 days. I don't think we'll see any tigers in the next 2 days. That will put the morale of the guest way down. He'll feel sad. And then you might lose that connection that you have formed with the guest. So you can always tell them, your guest might come to Kanha and say, like, I've had guests who have come to Kanha and told me, we want to see a lion. So I can just say, oh, we don't have lions. You won't see a lion over here. But you can always put it in a friendly way, in a joking way, where you are still not being very negative about it. You can always say, you know what, I have not seen a lion in Kanha till date. But if we see it, we'll be the first people on this planet to see a lion over here. So let's try for that as well. It gives your message as well that you don't have lions in Kanha, but it always in a funny way. So the guests feel, they are laughing and they feel connected to you. Always when you're giving information, You have to keep it simple. You have to keep it interesting. I have seen a lot of naturalists who are inclined towards the academics. They have a lot of scientific papers that they have published. They have discovered new species. They have found new behaviors, and they tend to get very scientific when they use a lot of scientific jargon, words which a common man might not use, or talk in a way where a story does not go in that particular language, and the guest feels disconnected because of this. So information has to be toned down in a way that a layman, or in a way that the guest will understand. A guest is not always a layman. You might get a guest who is into bird watching, and he might use words such as Philoscopus warblers, Acrocephalus warblers. So you have to know that as well. But if you start using words like Acrocephalus warblers and Philoscopus warblers for a guest who is not into birding, you will lose that guest. That guest might think, oh, this guy is a very professional birder. I am not at that level, so I probably won't be understanding what he's saying anyways. Why put an effort to try and listen to him? Using a lot of exclamations, this also helps in attracting the attention of a guest. Let's say you're walking or you're driving and everyone's attention is here and there. Everyone is trying to see what they are able to see. And then you see something, let's say you see a tiger. There is a tiger over there. There is no exclamation, there is no excitement in your voice. The guest might miss on what you're trying to say because it's just flat, plain voice. But, oh, look what there. And everyone starts looking at you where you're pointing. So using exclamations is very important. Using questions when I've put in a couple of questions. Did you know that? Did you see that? All these things will attract the attention of the guest. So the guest knows that you are talking to him or them, and they will keep on listening to you. You always want the guest to be attentive. You always want the guest to listen to whatever you are seeing. Using simple directions, this is when you're pointing at things. So imagine you are on a safari with me. I'm trying to show you a bird, and I tell you it's on that green tree. And you take a look around, all trees are green. So it becomes very difficult for the guest to understand which direction you're pointing at. Using the army clock direction technique. So at 3 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, these are very helpful. Trying to tell them, so count the third branch on the right. Those kind of things are very helpful. Using humor, I've already touched upon this, is very important. But there are always some sort of jokes that I have figured out, and a lot of people is best that you don't touch upon jokes which are political in nature, which are racist, or which are gender biased. So whenever you're trying to crack jokes, make sure you're not trying to offend anyone or any particular section, so that everyone feels they are funny. When you're on walks, when you're on a safari, as a naturalist, it's your responsibility to check on the health, the well-being of your guest as well. So visually and verbally checking on guests. Are you all okay? Should we proceed ahead? Are you all good? I hope the heat is not bothering anyone. Those kind of things are always very helpful. And the last point is summarizing. So if you take the guest out on a safari, when you're coming back, usually on morning safaris, by the time you come back, it's very hot. It's almost afternoon. You don't see a lot of things. So the guests are a little bit drowsy. They are, feeling sleepy. And it's been a long day. They might forget the things they have seen. So just a quick summarizing session. You know what? We started our morning. It was quite foggy. We didn't see a lot of things, but we were lucky that it all cleared up. That peacock that we saw was really nice. And we saw some vultures, and it's really rare to see vultures nowadays. So that was very nice. And finally, we did see some pug marks. That was really exciting. They were fresh pug marks, but we didn't see a tiger today. Maybe in the afternoon safari, we might see something. So you have just reminded them what were the important or what were the good things that you saw. And you can always do this at the end of the trip as well. Once you have done 5 safaris, 6 safaris with them, the whole, what was the most exciting things that you saw during their whole stay, so that they take these memories, they remember what was important as per the naturalist, and they'll keep these memories for a really long time.
Pranad, again share your screen.
Okay. Okay, I hope that's visible.
Yeah, it's visible. Yes.
So besides these techniques, besides some of the other points I touched upon, what are the other qualities that would help a naturalist? Like I've already mentioned, you are representing your country, you're representing your lodge or your organization. Um a lot of things that you are representing when you are in front of a tourist, especially if it's uh, I mentioned country part because many times you get a lot of foreign tourists. So there is, I think, it's nothing short of a matter of pride for to be a naturalist to people coming from outside India, and that's when these qualities are very important. Being well groomed, uh, how you dress, how how what kind of appearance you have. Speaks a lot about you. The guest will immediately start having some sort of impression about you the moment they say, even before you say hi to them, they've already started painting a picture in their mind of what kind of language this guy will use, what kind of naturalist he'll be, what kind of food he eats, all these just by looking at you. So your uh, being well groomed is quite important. Having a friendly nature, having a sort of nature where the tourist, the guest, is comfortable to come up to you and talk to you. Having a good sense of humor, I've already spoken about. Being a good observer, and not just being able to spot things in the wild, but when I say being a good observer and being a good listener is important, is to pick up signals, pick up signs when the guest wants to tell you something, when the guest is, let's say, not comfortable with something, but doesn't feel comfortable in sharing those things with you verbally. So picking up signs, you know what, the guest is not talking to me very frequently. He was very talkative in the morning. He's been very quiet for some time. Maybe he wants to use the loo. Being a good listener, when a guest checks in, they always tell you, I have a problem. I get dehydrated very quickly. So I hope you carry a lot of water. So maybe 2 or 3 times in the safari, I hope, Ian, you have a lot of water with you. If not, I am carrying some extra water. All these things are very important, shows that you care about the guest. Again, as I mentioned, forming that connection with the tourist, with your guest, is very important. And being a good observer and a good listener will help you form that connection. Additional skill sets that will help a naturalist, these are not always required everywhere that you might end up working, but definitely are helpful in this field. Driving is very important. Obviously, in many parks like Kanha, where I work at right now, the naturalists drive the safari vehicles. But there are some parks, popular parks as well, as like Ranthambore and Tadoba, where they have local drivers always. So as a naturalist, you just sit in the car with the guest and you don't have to drive. But being a naturalist, you are going to some remote locations, you're going away from town, and there might be an emergency where you have to drive, you have to bring in something from the market, bring some medicines, or you have to take a guest to the doctor for a quick visit. And if you know driving, it is always going to be helpful in this field. Knowledge about first aid is definitely helpful. Again, you might be working in some remote areas where the closest clinics, the closest hospitals might not be very close. So having a basic knowledge about first aid, what to do when there's a cut, what to do when there's a fracture, what to do when there's an allergic reaction, these sort of things are quite helpful. Um Knowing or understanding foreign languages will also be very helpful. We in India predominantly speak English as the only foreign language, but we do get tourists. One of the reasons why, in fact, we get very less tourists from, let's say, countries like Italy, Germany, Spain, Japan, is because we don't have a lot of guides who speak their language comfortably. And English is not a language that comes naturally to them. It's not something that they learn in their schools. So having knowledge or learning another language can also be very helpful. And basic computer skills nowadays, I think this is important in any field. Slowly computers are taking over. So this, in this particular field, it will help you in making presentations, keeping accounts, can help you in many different ways. Now, up till this point, I was talking about what a naturalist is doing when he or she is leading a tour, or they are working with a lodge, with a company. But a naturalist can create his or her own brand, and they can do many more things besides just guiding and leading tours. You can get into photography. It's quite common nowadays. A lot of people have very good cameras, and on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, you see so many people sharing such wonderful images. So you can definitely get into wildlife photography. You can get into writing articles, writing blogs for popular magazines. We have some magazines like Sanctuary Asia and Save Us, which they like to carry wildlife articles. But there are many, many more magazines. They might not be dedicated wildlife magazines, but they always like to carry a piece which is close to nature, which is about trekking, about travel. Um, if any of you have traveled in flights, pick up the in-flight magazine, and 9 out of 10 flights, if you pick up the magazine, you will see at least one article related to a forest, related to a trek, related to something to do with nature and travel tourism. So you can always contribute by writing as well. You can get, if you like video editing, you can get into editing videos. You can start creating your own YouTube channel. Short episodes might lead into creating TV shows as well. You can write books. Some of you might already be familiar with a book called Photographic Field Guide to Wildlife of Central India, written by Surya Ramachandran and David Raju. Both of them are naturalists, and they just had an idea where they wanted to, they saw naturalists carrying a bird book, a mammal book, a separate book for butterflies. They thought, why don't we just combine and make one book for Central India? And it's selling really nicely. So you can become an author, you can have inventive ideas and start writing. It might be a book just about your own experiences, and a lot of people like to read that as well. You can get into training, train with the forest department, training their staff, training youngsters to become naturalists. Like I have mentioned before, there is no academical course we have for anyone to become a naturalist, but there are certain uh, universities that have started courses which are quite close, and I think in future being a naturalist might also be looked upon as a full-time profession. And I already have a couple of colleges in Mumbai do a course called um, MSc in Wildlife Biodiversity. So they have a lecture about natural history, about naturalists. So that again, the students there come to know about this field, and somebody who's interested can look at into becoming a naturalist. You can get into scientific documentation. I've already told about naturalists who have written papers, found, made new discoveries of species, documented new behavior. So you can get into scientific documentation. You can get into travel documentation, which is really big. There are so many online platforms where people write about their travels, and a lot of people refer these articles, these blogs, just travel reports, trip reports, and that's how they come to know how to plan their travel. You can even start your own outdoors travel company, get into wildlife travels or mix wildlife with other things, and have a wholesome sort of a company. And you can even look at becoming freelance naturalist tour leaders. So what tour leaders do is, there are companies or travel agencies who want one person to lead the group right from the start point till the end point. So they pick them up from the airport. They're traveling with them throughout their whole journey, which might be 1 month long, sometimes 2 months long. And you get to see many different places. You get to talk to guests about all these wonderful places, and then finally drop them back to the airport from where they're leaving. And like I said, you make very good friends with this. Um, when you are with them for so long. So there are many things that a naturalist can think of doing besides being a naturalist. I have just written things that came to my mind. I'm sure there are things that I have missed, and maybe there are things that you can come up with as well. So thank you so much for your patience, for sitting with me through this presentation, and thank you, Pratiksha, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Pranad. It was an excellent presentation. Before you stop sharing, actually, I wanted to say,
Okay.
can you share some of your wildlife pictures? If it's possible, we still have 4-5 minutes left till
Okay.
we
Okay.
begin. Yeah.
Sure. Uh, Let's see. I have not selected anything. I'm just going into. I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, it's visible. Yes.
Okay, so these are things from the place I work. From Kanha, I work with a lodge called Singinava Jungle Lodge, and our property is 110 acres roughly, and it's connected to the buffer area. So we have a lot of activity that happens, a lot of wildlife activity that happens within our lodge as well. And there are a lot of birds. We have recorded about 130 birds in the resort premises itself. The main reason is we have left everything just like as it is, like a forested area. Less than 5% of the total area is under construction, where the rooms, the main building, the swimming pool, spa, everything is. So 95% of it is just like a forest. We take walks around there, and we see some really, really fantastic birds over there. So they are unfortunately organized alphabetically.
Is it
We
possible? Is it
Yes.
possible for you to also name the species?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there were some images of the black hooded oriole before. These are all black hooded orioles. This one you can see is eating a caterpillar, a moth caterpillar. Uh, we This was last year. We had this fantastic episode of a pair of black-naped monarchs making a nest just outside one of the guest rooms, and they got so comfortable with people walking up and down that we would stand probably about 10-15 feet away from them, but with a tripod and all, and they would still keep on going about their business of making the nest. So we got some really fantastic pictures at that time. This is one of the smallest woodpeckers that we have, the brown-capped pygmy woodpecker. And it's fun. Just at the start of the summers, they start fighting for nesting sites. And sometimes you have 2 or 3 pairs coming, and there's a lot of fighting, a lot of commotion. One pair trying to chase the other. You can see this one is making the nest, carving out the wood from inside the hollow and throwing it out. We have this beautiful banyan tree which fruits so it's not Ficus bengalensis, it's Ficus molurus, but I don't think there's any common name for this species. But it has fruits in the month of Jan, and every year we have thousands of birds that come to this tree. This year, unfortunately, it did not fruit because it was raining in January, usually when it fruits. And because of the rains, the flowers, I think, got spoiled, and did not the fruits were not there at all. Just shows how climate change is affecting all sorts of wildlife. But whenever it does, we have hundreds of barbets that come in there, brown-headed barbet making a nest. This year we also had the emerald dove, which made a nest inside our resort premises. So it was quite exciting. Such a beautiful bird. This is a juvenile of a common hawk cuckoo, the bird that we call papiha or brain fever. And this is actually the juvenile was being fed by jungle babblers. So the cuckoo had laid the egg in the babbler's nest and flown away, and then the babblers were raising the young one. But it was quite, I mean, the size was almost like a full-grown cuckoo. So something interesting I observed was it would keep on begging continuously, but when the babblers ignored it for a long time, then this cuckoo would go down on the ground and catch something. When it saw something, probably it would catch something by itself. So it was in that phase probably where the babblers were trying to push it out as well. But yeah, I mean, it would pose very nicely sometimes in good light. Got some very nice photos. So coppersmith barbet trying to get to its nest with some ficus fruits that you can see in its beak. The crimson sunbird is very rare. It's not a very good photo. It's just a record shot. But it's a very, very rare bird to encounter in Kanha. And this year, because we used to see a male and female together, they had probably made a nest somewhere. We didn't see the nest, but it was still exciting to see the crimson sunbird in the resort premises, a new bird added to our list of the lodge. And Pratiksha, with that, I think, do you want to move on to the
Yeah.
question?
Yes. You can stop sharing your screen now.
Okay.
Excellent presentation. The points covered were very, very informative, and I'm sure everyone who is attending today must have benefited some or the other way. So now with this we open the session for question and answer. If you have any doubt, you can either ask it directly by unmuting yourself, or you can write in the chat box. I can read out the questions to Pranav. And if possible, Pranav, you can turn on your video.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so Supriya Jha is saying that the presentation was excellent and so happy to hear you.
Thank you so much, Supriya.
Anybody, any kind of questions you would like to ask Pranad? He'll be there for another 10-15 minutes.
So Abhijit has asked a question. What would be the initial steps as a person to start a career as a naturalist? So Abhijit, like I had mentioned before, we don't have any academical a course or anything that helps you become a naturalist. It's just because of interest, and I think that interest is the first step that you can take towards becoming a naturalist. But then the next step is start going out on nature walks, try to visit a few national parks to understand the sort of wildlife that is there. Definitely invest in buying some good guidebooks for field guides for birds, for mammals, for insect life. And then finally, the last thing is try to find out lodges which do have naturalists. If you are at a point where you think you want to jump, if you're doing something else, if not, if you're a student, then get in touch with resorts which have naturalists and check with them if they want to employ a fresher. A lot of uh, companies, a lot of lodges do want freshers as well, and they take them up to become a naturalist with their lodge. So you can try to figure out which lodges, which place you want to work at first, and then it would always be, I think it would be really good to start at a place where you want to work rather than getting a place which you don't want to work at, and then trying to figure out which are the lodges over there. Like, for example, if it's Kana, just check which are the good lodges there, write to them if they have a naturalist, and tell them that you are a amateur naturalist looking for a job opportunity and if they have any vacancy. So that's where you can start at. Okay, Supriya has asked, can you share your contact details? So what I'm doing is I'm writing down my email ID and my mobile number in the chat box. Guys can take from there. So pranadpatil@gmail.com, no hyphen, no dots, no underscore, nothing. And I have put in my mobile number as well. That's the number where WhatsApp is also active. So call, message, WhatsApp, everything on one contact. Mukul is asking any recommendations for books or blogs on wildlife. Blogs, there are many blogging sites. Last Wilderness is an NGO which has a blog site that's very good. Sanctuary and Save Us magazines both have their blog sites as well. You can check there as well. A lot of lodges, resorts also have their own blogging sites where their naturalists put blogs. So you can look at Evolve Back, which is from a company based in Karnataka. They have a lodge at Kurg at Kabini. Their blogging site is very good. Singinava, the place where I work, we have a blog site. You can check there as well. And as for the books, if you're interested more in popular reading, then Save Us and Sanctuary Asia magazines, both are really good. BNHS, if you're a member of BNHS, they have a magazine called Hornbill, and there are some really nice articles that come in there as well. If you're looking at field guides, there are many. I mean, if you Google, I mean, Most of the guys use the same field guides, so these are very good. If you're looking just into reading wildlife related stuff, and if you're not started, I would definitely recommend starting with Jim Corbett series of books. Very, very excellently written and very inspiring books. So these are some of the books I can recommend for you to read related to wildlife. Okay, any people or information you know about geotourism? So geotourism, I am guessing, is about geography related to landscapes and all. Unfortunately, in India, it's not so big still. And to be very honest, I don't know many people related to geotourism. But so Parth is asking, Parth, if you can leave your email ID or something, I will check with a few friends, and if there is something in happening in India, I will definitely pass on the information to you. Or Parth, you can also connect with me on Facebook, Pranath Patil, and I can share the connective. If I get connected with people, I can connect you with them on Facebook or something like that. Is that only meant for males, or females can also work in this field? Definitely not restricted only to males. There are a lot of girls working as naturalists as well. The lodge where I work at, we have a lady naturalist there as well. She's from Indore, so it gender really does not is not, it has nothing to do whether you become a good naturalist or not. So some of my friends who are girls and naturalists are actually really, really good naturalists. So if you are a girl and if you're looking to become a naturalist, there's nothing stopping you. Okay. Samrita has asked, I myself am pursuing MSc in Biodiversity, Wildlife Conservation and Management, and you have showed me a path, a new path. Thanks a lot. Most welcome, Samrita. A lot of thanks you. So those who have enjoyed the presentation, I am really glad you liked it. Most welcome for all these wonderful compliments that you have given. Nikhil, hi Nikhil. Would like to talk to you on Pronat. Definitely, Nikhil, I'll connect with you. We can definitely discuss more.
Hi,
Okay.
Pranath, Nikhil. Hi,
Hi,
sorry.
Nikhil.
So I mean, you said there are no courses. That's why I reminded, Pronat is already there and working well.
Yes.
People.
Thank you so much, Nikhil, for bringing that up. Because yes, so Pagdandi Safaris is a chain of resorts in India, and they have started their own course of training naturalists, which is a really, really good course. I have a few friends who have gone through it, and they have really enjoyed it. They have learned a lot. Similarly, Taj Safaris also has their own course. So there are a couple of resort chains which have their own own courses. So Sheikh Hussain has you were showing David Raju more. So I was Sheikh, when I was actually making this presentation, I was trying to find photos of naturalists and figured out I don't have a lot of photos of myself. I have clicked photos of other naturalists, so I've used them in this presentation. There is a need, Amit has mentioned, there is a need for a full-fledged course as a naturalist, but it may take some time in universities. Being in Nagpur as a national park. I can understand the need. I have been visiting for your take on this need. So Amit and Nikhil, also to address, it was really great that Nikhil brought up the Pronat course, because I completely forgot about it. What happens in Africa is, at least in the southern African countries, they have a institution called FUGASA, Field Guide Association of South Africa. And there, if you want to work as a ranger or as a naturalist, what we say, you need to have gone through this course. They have 3 levels over there. Level 1 is a classroom session. You do that, you give an exam, you get your passing certificate, and then you start as a you don't get a permanent job. You start working with resorts, but you build on your experience, and that's how you complete your level 2. Once your level 2 is complete, then you can become a full-fledged ranger, you can get a job. But without doing this course, there is no way that you can become a ranger. So there it is a compulsion. uh, it's like if you want to become a doctor, you have to complete MBBS. If you want to become an engineer, you need a degree. So there, if you want to become a ranger, you have to be a Fugasa certified ranger. Otherwise, you can't get a job anywhere in Southern African countries. But here we don't have that. Um there are pros and cons both to having something like that. If you have a course, and we have a lot of there might be a lot of people who can't afford such courses and they want to become naturalists. So if you can't go through that course, you can't become a naturalist. That's a big letdown for such a course. But to have a unified or a centralized course would also be good, so that we start producing naturalists at the topmost level. If you see the rangers that work in Africa, they are really, really excellent. So there are both pros and cons of having a centralized course with maybe an university or something for a naturalist to become a naturalist. Riddhi has mentioned, please mention the websites and books in the WS group if possible. And it was very informative. Thank you. So, uh, Pratiksha, can we look at having?
Yeah, so we'll be sharing the presentation. The webinar is recorded, so the recording will be shared on the WhatsApp group. Also, if you have any book recommendation or websites, you can also drop in the message on our WhatsApp group. Pranat.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, perfect. I'll do that.
And I have one question for you. Uh,
Yes.
so I'm sure that you must be going on field almost every day, and you must be having lots of memories and understandings from the nature. But any particular memory you would like to share, which is really stuck in your mind?
So I actually really enjoy interacting with kids a lot. Whenever I go back to Mumbai, I go to a lot of schools and do these wildlife talks with kids, and it surprises me always how much interest these kids take nowadays. Quite recently, this was last year only, we had a family from Mumbai, and there was a 4-year-old girl in the a daughter along with her parents and grandparents who had come. And we saw a butterfly. So I was just talking to her and I told her, you know what, the butterfly, it's a mama. But there's some butterflies where males and females look different. So I said, this is a mama butterfly, and it's probably trying to find a plant where she can lay her eggs, and then the babies will be there. And you know what? The babies don't look like the papa and the mama butterfly. And she went, yes, I know the caterpillars are very different. So a 4-year-old kid knew what caterpillars are, and I probably when I was 4 year old, I was eating dirt and didn't know what a caterpillar was. So that's something that has stuck with me even today. So
I'm
it's
Yeah, so it was quite an exciting memory, and your field is really fascinating. I'm sure there will be more naturalists in the coming, and there will be courses, full-fledged courses to be a naturalist. Thank you so much for interacting and patiently answering the questions, and the presentation was extremely informative. Thank you for
most
joining
welcome.
us today. Yeah, and if anyone we can take another last question if anyone wants to ask. Otherwise, we can end the session.
Pratisha, very quickly, there is one chat which says this person doesn't have WhatsApp. So if I can put down the names of the books and everything, I'll quickly type it there. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, it's done. It's okay.
Okay. Okay, so I have mentioned the books. Those who wanted, you can just quickly read from there or copy the message, and hopefully that is helpful.
Yeah. And the webinar link, the recording will be shared on the WhatsApp group by tomorrow. Thank you everyone for joining. If you have any further queries, you can ask on the WhatsApp group. We'll be there till tomorrow. Okay, good night everyone. Thank you.
All right, good night. Thank you.